Hey guys, what's up? It's Kevin for the win, and we're back for another edition of Diablo 3. Today on the channel, we are taking a look at the Masquerade of the Burning Carnival set armor for the Necromancer class. It's a Bone Spear set. Let's get right into it. Masquerade of the Burning Carnival, 2-piece bonus Simulacrums, no longer take damage, gain all ruins, and its cooldown is refreshed when you die. 4-piece bonus, while you have Simulacrums, damage is reduced by 50%, damage you take is split between the Simulacrum. 6-piece bonus, Bone Spear cast by you and your Simulacrums deals 6,000% increased damage. So we're mostly going to be using a full set of the Masquerade of the Burning Carnival, but as you can see here, on the shoulders as well as the bracers, we're going to be using the Gold set. A Gold is very simple. 2-piece bonus, reduced damage taken by 15%, increased damage dealt by 30%. 3-piece bonus, 30% damage from elite monsters' attacks, and 30% less damage you get taken to it. We're going to be using Meltorius's Petrified Spike, as you can see here, to increase the power of Bone Spear. That's a 2-handed weapon. We're going to be using Haunted Visions, Crispin Sentence, Convention of Elements, and a Dainty's Binding, because we do use, in fact, a couple of curses here, so it definitely works in our benefit. So that's pretty much the full breakdown for the skills. Bone Spike, Sudden Impact. You could use Grim Scythe here if you wanted to. I personally am not using it. Bone Spear, Blighted Marrow. That way whenever we throw spears, it'll pass through things. Devourer, Devouring Aura. That way we can get back our essence pretty quickly. Simulacrum, Reservoir. We definitely want to use this here. Frailty, Scent of Blood, because remember, enemies applied with Curse are Simulacrums, their pet damage. Bone Armor, Vengeful Armaments, or you could use Dislocation, I prefer that one. For the passives, Spreading Malediction, Serration, Bone Prison, Final Service. That's the way I would recommend going with this particular set build. In the Knights Cube, you want to run Scythe of the Sickle, Grimdor's Marrow Guards to power up your Bone Spears of your Simulacrums firing off, and a Ring of Royal Grandeur, so that way we can get the maximum amount of set bonuses for everything we're wearing. For the follower, honestly, my recommendation, a Flavor of Time, a Nemesis Bracer. You could put a Broken Crown here. I have the Sage set because I was grinding some Death Breaths for stuff that I needed. Goldskin's not particularly bad as well. Everything else pretty much far away. It's just about Broken Crown, Nemesis Bracers, Flavor of Time. For the purpose of this showcase, we're going to be doing a Greater Rift 60, a Greater Rift 70, and a Greater Rift 80. That way I can show you Torment 14 through 16 difficulty and how it fares in this armor. Very easy armor. First thing you do is obviously you cast your Simulacrum. Then you're going to fire off your Bone Spears. Every time you fire a Bone Spear, your Simulacrums will fire a Bone Spear as well. Based on the way that I have this armor optimized, which I'll talk about in a second, it's probably in your benefit to be far away from the enemies. Also, keep in mind that you want to keep an eye on your bone armor and maintain the perfect amount of stacks that you have. So you want the maximum bone armor whenever possible. Whenever you run into a elite pack that it feels like your Bone Spear's taking too long to destroy them, feel free to cast a Curse and then fire off a Bone Spear, and that should take care of things. If you feel like you're burning through your essence too quickly, use your Bone Spikes to bring back your primary resources, because it is your primary resource generation on this particular build. Again, you could use Grim Scythe as well, but this set does better from attacking from far away as it does up close and personal. In terms of optimization for this particular armor, what's the first thing you should probably focus on? Well, as you see, we're one of the few sets that doesn't rely on Captain Crimson. However, with that being said, it never hurts to have cooldown reduction 8.0% wherever possible on this armor, so that way you could get your Simulacrums back pretty quickly. You could get your bone armor back pretty quickly as well. I would recommend 8.0 resource cost reduction wherever possible. This will help tremendously because it does cost a lot of essence for you to fire off Bone Spears. So it is something that you should probably look into and getting 8.0% resource cost at 8.0%. So that way it just reduces the resource cost that you're using. Subsequently from there, I would highly recommend, since our main source of damage is Bone Spear, putting 15% Bone Spear wherever possible on this armor. That will help tremendously just to increase the amount of damage, and could, in theory, potentially help you out with 5 to 10 Greater Rifts even there. Further optimization I would recommend, because Necromancers really need a lot of critical hit damage to be able to do things effectively. I would recommend on the helm, Crit Chance 6.0%. On your gloves, I would recommend these 3 stats. Crit hit chance at least 6.0%. Crit hit damage 50%. That's maximum crit hit damage. And then I would recommend attack speed at least 8.0%. If you could get that 7, though, that's perfectly fine. But the higher the better. Those free stats on your gloves will allow you to increase your greater rift runs by about anywhere between 10 to 15 greater rifts, depending on your skill level. For this particular armor, I'd say it would even probably push it to 20 greater rifts higher that you'll be able to do. Other than that, really, there's not so much super optimization in terms of stats, obviously, because the necromancers rely on intelligence. It's in your benefit to maximize the intelligence stats on all pieces of your gear and your ring as well. That's definitely something you should look for. Further optimization, obviously, you're going to need to augment your armor with legendary gems. If you're not familiar with that, basically what it is a Kanai's Cube recipe that you acquire basically at endgame after you finish the main storyline, in which you can augment a legendary gem. Legendary gems are the gems that you level up in Greater Rifts with a piece of armor that's Ancient Legendary or Primal Ancient Legendary. Ancient Legendary is the one with the gold border. Primal Ancient Legendary is the red one. I'll talk about Primal Ancient Legendaries in a second. So you basically put the piece of gear in the Kanai's Cube with 3 flawless topazes and a legendary gem. My recommendation is to do a legendary gem that's at least 80 to 100 value, as that will give you maximum amount of damage that you're trying to strive for with this particular build. But if you feel like you're struggling in the early game, feel free to do it at a level 70. You can always overwrite a augmentation on an armor piece, so don't stress that too much. Remember, this is a marathon, not a race. So yeah, basically you take the piece of gear that's either Ancient Legendary, Primal Ancient Legendary, 3 topazes, and a legendary gem that you're not using. It's probably around level 80. Put it in the Kanai's Cube for the recipe and augment the armor. On theory, a level 80 gem will give you about 400% increased intelligence. This is for the Necromancer only, mind you. Other classes, depends on the gem and what their stats to help them get stronger is. So, on average, a level 80 is about 400 increased intelligence. About level 100 is about, I believe, somewhere between 5 to 800. So, the higher up, the more attack stat you'll get on it. That's why I kind of recommend trying to do it that way. That was Greater Rift 62 minutes and, 3 minutes and 32-second clear time. As you can see, very fast. It's more of a push build. It's not really a speed build, but on lower Greater Rifts, it kind of acts more like a speed build. Same strategy as before. We are trying to get our Simulacrums activated. Then from there, what we want to do is activate our bone armor and then start throwing spears around. Further optimization for the legendary gems on this particular set armor, I would recommend first and foremost Zay's Stone of Vengeance. Zay's Stone of Vengeance says for every 10 yards between you and an enemy, you do an increased amount of damage based on the level that the gem is at currently for you. Second thing that I would recommend is Bane of the Stricken, because although normally a Bone Spear will only take 1 to kind of clear through a lot of enemies, on higher Rift Guardians, it never hurts to have to fire off a couple of them to do Bane of Stricken here. I would also recommend Bane of the Trap, because at level 25 it gets an automatic slow that has a chance to proc, as well as just its natural ability where if your opponent's under a status affliction of any sort, you do increased amount of damage. Curses, to my knowledge, do actually count for that as well as obviously we're using our Bone Spikes, which cause dizzying status, stun status, so definitely inner benefit to run Bane of the Trap in this particular build as well. Now, Masquerade of the Burning Carnival is considered one of the S-tier builds for the Necromancer class in Diablo 3. The only other build that really does just as well in terms of high Greater Rifts would be the Legacy of Dreams Poison Scythe build, which I will cover sometime next week. So, if you're looking for, though, a very easy set armor that doesn't require a lot of optimization, this is probably the way that you want to go. Obviously, keep in mind that the Grace of Inarius set armor was the starter set for Season 25 of Diablo. As all of you know, Season 25 of Diablo 3 is supposed to end on April 10th. So I believe then it's about, maybe about 2 weeks before we'll see Season 26. Season 26 of Diablo 3 is going to bring some interesting changes, particularly to the Barbarian, in which the Raycore set armor is getting kind of a complete overhaul. So it's going to be a Furious Charge set that also works with Ancient Spear. It looks pretty interesting as to what it's going to be able to do. It's going to have its more own unique playstyle, as opposed to trying to be a little brother to the Hammer of the Ancients Immortal King set armor, which it kind of is known for at the moment. Other things that are very interesting for Diablo 2, Diablo 3 Season 26, is that they're adding new types of endgame, in which they're kind of like extra nightmares, in which, excuse me, you fight a lot of enemies, and you have to kill a whole bunch of enemies within a certain amount of time, and the more that you're able to clear without, like, stopping, I believe it's your massacre bonus or something of the sort, you then get a lot of Paragon that way. So it's basically a new way to farm Paragon. It is season exclusive to Season 26. There's no word as to whether this is going to be kept in the game long-term beyond the season, but it sounds like something that a lot of players already have been looking forward to. In the PTB, a lot of people were very excited about it. It looks very promising for Paragon farming. Most people know Paragon farming, the only way you could do it really is running a lot of Greater Rift 70s, and after a while it does get tedious despite even looting and everything of the sort. So I think that's going to be pretty good for the general health of the game. There was no real significant nerfs that came out of this particular season. It was more like just trying to help certain sets get a little bit more buffed. Obviously, they have been nerfing quite a lot of things, as most people know who are a fan of Masquerade of the Burning Carnival. Got nerfed 2 seasons ago. Gears of Dreadland recently got nerfed. Firebird this season got nerfed. Mundanugu at one point also was nerfed. The only thing they have never touched is really Whirlwind Barbarian for quite a bit. So it definitely seems interesting what they're doing Season 26. I was hoping we were going to get a little bit more buffs to certain things, because obviously Season 25 saw that really bizarre change to the Spirit of Iraq set, which is the one with the Spider Queen. I feel like it was better before the changes. And by better, I mean it was just more functional and seemed to work better and flow better. Now it's like got a very confusing thing that, yeah, the lore behind it makes it a lot of sense for it to work that way, but it's not very strong in my personal taste. And actually, it's kind of one of my least favorite armors. I think I'd actually rather play Zunimasa at this point. And I hate Zunimasa. A lot of people know that over the Spirit of Iraq set. So right now, really, when it comes to Diablo 3, it's going to be more of the same. I'm honestly surprised we're even getting a Season 26. Obviously, I have a feeling that this was greatly in part due to the fact that Diablo 2 Resurrected hasn't been doing pretty well. Obviously, a 2.4 patch has been stalling for quite a while already. That we had a couple of ladders, PTB for that. They said it was going to come out. Then we were in a couple weeks. It's not till like second week of April that we're going to finally see 2.4. And the ladder's not going to be for another 2 weeks after that, which is quite disappointing to say the very least. So that's why kind of also content on the Diablo end has been kind of a little scarce on the channel as of late. I know I just recently started getting back into the groove of things. I kind of had some weird stuff going on in my life that was very transitional, that caused me to kind of not be able to do as many videos this season as I originally wanted to. Hopefully I'll be able to finish all the armor classes before the season goes live for Season 26. If not done, we have other things to work on for Season 26. That was a Greater Rift 70 tournament, 15 difficulty, 4 minutes and 56-second clear time. Obviously, as you go higher up in the Greater Rifts, it's going to take you longer to clear certain things based on the dungeon layout and everything sort. Alright, this is going to be a Greater Rift 80. Same strategy as before, but we got to be careful. We're going to fire off some Bone Steers from far away. We're going to make sure we cast our Simulacrum. That way we're doing the maximum amount of damage possible. We're going to fire our Bone Spears off here quite a bit from the distance. Here is where distance is going to matter a lot more. Keep in mind, as you go higher up in the Greater Rifts, enemies have more HP. Enemies can do more damage to you. So this is when you can't just go guns blazing, or in this case, spears blazing, into everything that you see around you. You have to kind of keep your distance. That way you can maximize the amount of damage that your Zay's Stone of Vengeance, a legendary gem, is doing. On top of that, obviously, you have to be more careful because there's going to be a lot more AoE, area of effect, attacks that are being blown off. Those are basically explosions, or when you see one of the fat mobs explode and fire off like a whole bunch of serpents, everything sort. Ice on the ground, poison pools, explosions, lasers. So that's basically where Masquerade of the Burning Carnival has to be a bit more careful, because as I've always said before in the channel, when it comes to the Necromancer class, that's one of my favorite classes in Diablo 3, and to a lesser extent even in Diablo 2, but they are very glass cannon-ish with their builds. So in the lower Greater Rifts, they feel like they could just take on the world and everything of the sort. Then as they go higher up, they kind of get knocked back down. Case in point there, we walked into a lot of AoE effect, which is why I recommended having Final Service as one of the passives. I know it didn't make as much sense because of, obviously, there's Simulacrums over some, but it does help tremendously in able to prevent you from taking unnecessary, I should say, death. That way you can at least maximize your 4-piece chance bonus of just leveling up a gem. Now, also keep in mind, in terms of leaderboard placement, I would say Masquerade of the Burning Carnival is probably your best choice for the Necromancer. However, it's on the lower of the top performing armors. Obviously, Spin to Win sets are the ones that usually dominate the leaderboard. So you have Whirlwind Barbarian, which is Wrath of the Waste, Gears of Dreadland, which is the Demon Hunter Spin to Win build. You have Patterns of Justice for the Monk set, which is the Tempest Rush build using Sweeping Wind. Those three are kind of like the top things. Then you have Mundanugu. Then you have Firebird variations, sometimes Chantotum Veer, sometimes Hydra builds for the Wizard. Then you have pretty much after that Necromancer, Masquerade of the Burning Carnival. This is armored, however, if you try this build out, where the more time that you invest into it, the higher it's going to go up in terms of clear times. Or not clear times, but in terms of how far you can go in the Greater Rift. Fully optimized with everything that you're seeing on screen, and following my advice, and making sure you're always clicking your bone armors and spearing from far away when possible, and applying curses on elite packs when you need to be able to do more damage to them. You should be, in theory, able to clear Greater Rift 135 to 140 with this armor with ease solo. You could potentially clear Greater Rift 150 solo with this particular armor. It's a matter of time, play style, how aggressive you are, how patient you are, in terms of Greater Rifts and everything of the sort. In a group of 4, where everybody knows what they're doing, you actually might be one of the slower armors because you are a push build. So keep that in mind. So you might have a harder time finding teammates that are willing to play with you because of how slow you are compared to like a Spin to Win type of variation of a build. So my recommendation, though, even with a group of 4 skilled players that are your teammates, obviously you plus 3 others, you should be able to clear Greater Rift 150s with this armor with relatively ease. Not a lot of hassle whatsoever. Alright, so as you can see here, one of the things that we've definitely been very cautious about is getting near elite packs. We're going to always want to fire off our Bone Spears from as far away as possible when we're on higher Greater Rifts. Pretty much having our Simulacrums do most of the work. Every once in a while, you're going to need to cast your curses on elite packs to fire off a Bone Spear to increase the amount of damage that way, just so that you don't spend more time fighting them than you should necessarily be doing. Also keep in mind that you can always repop your Simulacrum, even if they are already there. Because with Reservoir, we'll be able to get a whole bunch of essence back. If you're kind of playing my playstyle that you see on screen right now, in theory, you should never run into a situation where you're running out of essence. If you're running out of essence, it just means that you're wasting too many spears. Remember, when one of these spears fires off, if it cuts through a straight line of enemies and passes through a lot of enemies, it's pretty much going to cut through them like a hot knife through butter. So you have to just kind of think of that. That basically where you're pointing your spear is having your other guys throw their spears. So you don't need to necessarily throw a lot of spears, because for every 1 spear that you're firing, your Simulacrums are firing off 2 more that are really supercharged and powered up based on the way that we have this build set up concurrently. So it's a matter of just kind of thinking it through, feeling it out, understanding how this armor works, understanding the distance that you need. Every once in a while, if you're too up close and personal, pop a Bone Spike so you can cause them to get stunned, walk back, hit a curse, fire off some Bone Spears that way. Try to avoid as much close contact with this particular build as possible, because it will not work out for you if you're doing this up close and personal as you're running for the Greater Rift. That's why you can't just speed through with this armor to be able to get the super fast clear time, because it's not meant to be designed as an armor to do that. This is more of a very incredibly strong push build type of thing. Alright, or push build type of build, right? So let's fire off a couple more Bone Spears. We're getting up to the Rift Guardian. The Rift Guardian here, as you're getting higher up, you're going to have to apply a little bit more of your skills that are on this particular build that you haven't been using primarily up until this point. I'll show you that in a second. Let's cut through these enemies here. As you can see, even sometimes when I'm throwing my Bone Spears, I'm doing like quadrillions of damage. Just a matter of amount of distance, how many Bone Spears pass through. We're going to go here. That way we can have enough space to fight the Rift Guardian. Here we go. Let's step back here. Let's fire off a couple more Bone Spears. The Rift Guardian should be spawned pretty soon. Alright, so with the Rift Guardian, what you basically want to do is you want to apply a curse when possible, throw off a couple of Bone Spears, usually like 2. And with everything else that we have, Bane Stricken, Bane of the Trap, Zay Stone Avengers, you should be able to pop the Rift Guardian relatively quickly. If it feels like it's taking a long time, that means you have to level up your legendary gems. You have to look back at your gear, see if you have 15% Bone Spear wherever possible. Make sure you have the maximum possible roll for all your intelligence on every pieces. Make sure you have resource cost reduction. Just to the sake of argument, you could throw more spears out. Cooldown's kind of helpful just for the Simulacrum to have. Make sure your Haunted Visions is good. Make sure you're augmenting your armor. All these things are very doable. You know, just farming with any Necromancer build, you should be able to, with Greater Rift runs that are like 3-minute clear times, greater 70. Probably find the full build of this in about 4 hours of playing. Okay, so that was Greater of 80, Tournament 16 plus difficulty, 6-minute clear time, obviously because of the dungeon layout and everything of the sort. Pretty much add, every 10 Greater Rifts, add like basically a minute to that. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's Diablo 3 video. As always, a like on this video is greatly appreciated. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, definitely consider doing so, as it helps the channel grow, and I will see you for the next one.